Shalom, I'm Rabbi Chaim Richman from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. Welcome to Light to the Nations, and this is our first episode of our new internet television series. You know, this is being broadcast to you on the day of the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, Tisha B'Av, and this is a day of very tragic proportions for the Jewish people. This is the day on which both holy temples were destroyed, and actually many other calamities also befell the Jewish people throughout history. If you recall, the first mention of the 9th of Av is really in the context of the spies that we read about in the book of Numbers, Sefer Bamidbar, when Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, sent the spies to the land of Israel to check out the situation then, and they returned after traversing the land for 40 days. They returned with an evil report, all except for Yehoshua and Kalev, who actually attempted to rally the nation and strengthen them. The other spies, who were all princes of the tribes of Israel, delivered a very slanderous report against the land of Israel and very much broke the spirit of the people against going in, and basically the people cried that entire night, and God declared that this would be a night of crying in the future as well. That is to say, of course, not that God had it in for the Jewish people or that the day is predisposed to suffering, but that when it would be necessary for the attribute of divine justice to administer punishment, and when there would be that situation according to the divine wisdom, that this day had a certain quality because of the spies, and actually because of some prehistory as well, that we won't discuss at the moment, that gave it this type of, if you would even predisposition towards calamity. That is today, the 9th day of Av, and this is a day when all of Israel is united in mourning for the Holy Temple. So it's a day of national mourning, and it's a day really when we have a very, very unique halachic status, a very, very unique kind of situation in biblical law, in that all of the house of Israel become like mourners for a close relative, observing the customs and the detailed observances for one who, God forbid, is in mourning over a close family relative. And that involves fasting. In addition to the fast, we are sitting on the floor. There are dirges and lamentations that are read. We don't wear leather shoes. There are other types of what are referred to in halakha, in Jewish law, as afflictions that we observe in order to show our spiritual identification with the destruction of the temple. It's all about expressing ourselves in this traditional way of mourning to demonstrate how much we feel the temple is really something missing from our lives. It is actually quite apropos, because first of all, we would like to begin our series of Light to the Nations with an in-depth study of laws pertaining to the commandment of building the temple, which include the structure of the temple and many, many details that we haven't really had the opportunity before, especially in a medium like this, to explain slowly and with, in a relaxed manner, and being able to show you some of our graphics and our illustrations as well at the same time. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you, because after all, the temple, we believe, is the source of blessing for the whole world. That is material blessing and spiritual blessing, because it is the source of the indwelling of the divine presence. It is the fulfillment of not only one commandment but many commandments, but what it is and why it is so important and why it is prophesied by every prophet in Israel is because it is a key factor in the spiritual tikkun, the rectification, the fixing, as it were, of humanity. And that's why we read in all the prophets how when the temple is rebuilt, there will be a tremendous outpouring of spiritual knowledge and understanding felt by everyone. There'll really be an unparalleled unity experienced by all of humanity in a way totally unparalleled and not yet experienced. And certainly the time that we all look forward to as Jews, as righteous Gentiles, as people who are rooted in common biblical faith, we are looking forward to this time of what I like to refer to as the restoration of the honor of Hashem, the God of Israel, in the eyes of all of mankind. And there are a lot of people in the world who I think really don't understand what this so-called obsession with the temple is. It certainly can be viewed by many as an obsession, especially when there aren't a lot of people that are talking about the temple. But it's so important that we understand from the very, very beginning, if you would allow me to use some of my time now as an introduction to the whole subject, and on what better day than today, the day when we are all really required to internalize as best as possible what it means to really be without the temple. And the concept of mourning for the loss of the Holy Temple, yes, it's about decreasing our pleasure. It's about minimizing our physical enjoyment on this day so that we are in touch with a certain raw side of something being missing. But it's also about really understanding why we need the temple in the first place. And getting back to this idea of, these people are obsessed about the temple, understand that we're not talking here about a building or a symbol or ritual or structure. Yes, the temple is all of those things. But what the temple really represents, which is why the Jewish people were brought into the world and what our major mandate and destiny is, the temple really represents the concept that God can dwell in this world amongst mankind in this very physical, earthly place, and yet everything in this world can be elevated for divine purpose, for connecting with God. Everything in this world can be seen as a reflection of godliness. And more importantly, the concept the temple really teaches us is that God is very, very concerned with man, and that he will be with us if we allow him a place. And how much we need this one place on earth, unlike any other, that he has chosen, that he has decided, not our decision, that he has chosen from the very beginning of time and sanctified for himself as a way of separating, as a way of bringing about some sort of change in our consciousness to know that he really does stay with us in this world, that every aspect of our lives can be transformed and really fixed on a consciousness of God. That doesn't mean that we're not part of this world. It doesn't mean that we're not very, very much physical, ordinary human beings given over to all of the limitations and inadequacies of humanity as well. But all this is very precious to God. This is something very, very unique in Jewish thought, the sanctification of this world. And that's really what the message of the temple is all about, and why the temple is so important to God. And so, today, the 9th day of Av, is the crescendo of a 3-week period of mourning for the Holy Temple. And as I mentioned, this is very, very unique because we are all mourners today. We are all feeling this loss, this deprivation, this anguish of being without the temple. And really, if we really are mourners, if we really are feeling that loss, the question is going to be, what are we going to be doing tomorrow? Where are we going to be headed tomorrow? In what direction? And what is our attitude about the temple going to be tomorrow? Because, unfortunately, there are many people who have, I think, a misconception about this whole process. And that misconception basically is that, we don't really think so much about the temple all year round, but during this period of time, it's very much correct and very fitting and proper to think about it, because after all, this is the time when it was destroyed, on the 17th day of Tammuz. The siege began, And then the temple was eventually destroyed and ransacked and gutted, and the Jewish people went into exile. So it's very much worthwhile, one time a year to suffer along with the collective consciousness of the Jewish people. But how do we feel about the temple later on, in the middle of the winter or in the spring? Do we talk about it? Do we consider it to be something to aspire to and something important? And really, mourning, it's not about getting something over with, showing, okay, we are very, very religious, we want to feel very righteous and do the right thing in God's eyes, and we want to show that we really are, pining for the Holy Temple, so let's turn up the flame of the mourning during this period of time, and let's do all of those things which are required according to Jewish law, and there are a number of things which we won't go into at the moment, to show that we are in mourning for the temple. Let's do those things, and let's do them with gusto to show that we really feel badly about this loss, and then go on with it. That's not what it's about. That's more like a type of lip service. That's more like a type of exterior, external kind of observance, which is not really connected to something internal. What we're really interested in, and what Jewish law is really interested in, what Hashem, God, is really interested in this process, is that we are motivated by bringing it home and by internalizing it and by thinking and by observing this mourning practice. We're really motivated to want to see a change in the situation, that we should no longer have to mourn, that we should merit to rebuild the temple, because our sages tell us, a very pithy, succinct, and powerful expression, that a generation, every generation, including ours, that does not merit to see the rebuilding of the temple is reckoned the same in God's eyes as the generation which destroyed it. In other words, if we do not rebuild the temple, we are guilty of destroying it, because if we would have been worthy, God would have found us worthy of being able to do just that. So our goal, clearly, in expressing ourselves in mourning for the temple, is to show God that it really means something to us. It's impossible for us to go on, that we really feel something terribly lacking from our lives, that we don't want to be mourning again next year, that we want to do something about the situation. And that it's not just lip service. And so when we realized that this would be broadcast today, we were actually very inspired, and we felt that was really something from heaven, that it was just came out that way. Nothing ever just comes out some way in a random way, because we felt that this is a message that Hashem allowed us to facilitate, to begin learning today, to begin this online study in depth of the Holy Temple as a sign of, let's say, resolution, that we would like to change the situation. Now, our sages tell us that when we study the laws of the temple and we focus on the laws regarding the offerings in the temple, God considers it as if we have actually brought that offering. And the more we take this seriously, the more that we learn about the temple, the more it's considered that we are actually occupying ourselves with the building of the temple. But here again, just as the mourning practice can be used, perhaps subconsciously, by a person almost as an excuse to just departmentalize his year and say, okay, now I'm going to be concerned about the temple, and the rest of the year I'm going to party. Now I'm going to show how guilty I feel and how terrible I feel, and it's all my fault that the temple isn't rebuilt. But try talking to me in December about the temple, it'll be a different story. But rather, we want that the mourning procedure should be honest, should be real, should be, something that really moves us to the gut. So too, this idea of our sages telling us that, if we study, it's as if we're actually involved in the rebuilding of the temple. Well, we know very well that that isn't enough, and that the study is not going to exempt us from action. We know very well that we can't pull one over on God. So it's all about what we have in our heart, what our motivation is, and what we really want to accomplish through our study. Because study, according to our sages, the concept of Torah study is not about just amassing more and more knowledge for its own sake. Yes, there is an idea of having as much access to the information of the Torah as possible, because that is the embodiment of holiness. That is the ratzon. That is the will of God. But the real task and the real challenge of Torah study is to learn on the condition of doing. Because the Torah is totally action-oriented. This is something that we can't emphasize enough, that we have taught repeatedly. The Torah is not about philosophy. It's not about, a feeling. It's not about emotion. And it's not about something going on in someone's mind. It's all rooted very, very firmly in this world. And again, as we mentioned, that's really the beauty of the concept of the temple, that God would choose to dwell in this world, even though he has all the heavenly spheres, he has all the angels. As Solomon said when he dedicated the first temple, he said, "My Lord, the heavens and the heavens of heavens cannot possibly contain you, how much less this house?" And that is absolutely true. But yet, it is not God that needs the temple. It's man that needs the temple, so that we can have that focal point of holiness, to realize that God is in this world and that we can walk with him in everything we do. So when we study the laws of the temple, when we occupy ourselves with these lofty concepts and with these very, very specific physical dimensions and aspects of the commandment of rebuilding, we should have in mind that yes, we want very much to show God, especially during this time of year and every day, how much we feel that we are missing something in our lives from the temple, how much we realize how important it is to him. But also, we don't just want to study it and get that extra credit, that it's as if we're rebuilding the temple. We want to study it because we want it to be real. We want to be so ready. We want to do everything possible in our power to bring about that time when we will be not just, we won't just say that we'll merit to see the rebuilding, but we'll be involved in the rebuilding. Because as we're going to see, according to the great codifier Maimonides, it is a positive commandment incumbent upon all of Israel, behooving all of Israel to rebuild the temple. It is not the job of one particular group of people or one particular individual, and it is certainly, according to Maimonides, not something that God himself is going to just bring about in a miraculous way. There is always the touch of the miraculous in everyday life, especially in Jewish life. We believe in miracles, and there's always a partnership between man and the divine. We want to be actively involved in the rebuilding of the Holy Temple. And that's really what our study and, of course, our preparation at the Temple Institute is all about. It's about fulfilling the commandment of rebuilding the temple as best as possible at this time now, according to the situation in which we are in. So, that is the background of our first program, Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av, a day, the very mention of which is just a scourge to the Jewish people, something very, very traumatic. What better day, and what better time than right now, at this moment, wherever you are, to begin and to accept upon ourselves a proper study of the Holy Temple on the condition of being involved in the rectification of the honor of God and in the reinstitution of 1/3 of all of the Torah's commandments, and in the aspiration to see the time that Hashem himself promises us we will see, the time that every prophet spoke of, when there will be a new understanding and a new unity felt by all of humanity in the worship and in the understanding and in the appreciation of Hashem, the one God of Israel. So that's what we are going to begin now. During our broadcasts of Light to the Nations, we will be touching upon many subjects in a very, very varied and multifaceted approach to Torah study, which we hope will appeal equally to all viewers, whether Jewish or Gentile. So too, when it comes to an in-depth study of the Holy Temple, the series with which we are beginning Light to the Nations, the Holy Temple is something which is important for all of humanity. It's not a synagogue. It is not something which is applicable or which is needed only for Israel. It is something which elevates the entire human race. So, let us begin. We are going to be studying the classic work of Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, otherwise known as Maimonides. And here we can see on your screen some biographical details about this great Jewish sage, one of the foremost authorities in Jewish law, and one of the earliest codifiers of the very vast structure of Jewish tradition. So the code of Maimonides, known as Mishnah Torah, which literally means a repetition of the Torah, is a very, very important and invaluable work. Part of this vast work is known as the section dealing with avodah, the service in the temple. And we are going to begin by studying the Hilchot Beit HaBechira. These are the laws of the chosen house. Beit HaBechira, the chosen house, is an expression which is used by our sages of blessed memory to describe the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. And I'm going to be utilizing a very beautiful edition of the Hilchot Beit HaBechira, published exclusively by the Temple Institute. And we're going to be sharing with you some of the illustrations and graphics that have been designed especially for the teaching purposes of the Temple Institute. So, Maimonides is a universally accepted authority on the subject of the temple itself, and of course there are always different opinions about different aspects of halakha, the transmission of Jewish law. One of the interesting things about Maimonides in his approach to an understanding of the Holy Temple is that, first of all, as I mentioned, he maintains that the rebuilding of the Holy Temple is a positive commandment. Positive commandment, when I say that, I mean as opposed to a negative commandment, because the commandments of the Torah can be divided into positive and negative. There are positive commandments such as honor the Shabbat, such as to wear tzitzit. These are positive commandments involving doing, and there are negative commandments to refrain. So he says it is a positive commandment. It is one of the action-oriented commandments which is applicable to all of us today to rebuild the temple. We have to see exactly under what circumstances and if there are any provisos about exactly when this commandment would be in effect. But suffice it to say, for the moment, Maimonides clearly tells us that it is in fact a positive commandment. And the reason that these codes are so important in our understanding of how Jewish law works, you see, because the rabbis have a methodology of deriving Jewish law from the earliest sources, that is, from the Torah itself, from the 5 books of Moses, from the experience of the transmission of this knowledge that God gave over to Moses on Mount Sinai. We've spoken a lot in the past about the oral tradition, the whole concept of all of the details of the commandments that were given by God to Moses during the period of 40 days and 40 nights that he was with him on Mount Sinai. And taken together, the entire process of the transmission of Jewish law is codified by our great rabbi. So we're going to be examining how Maimonides approaches the concept of the positive commandment of the temple, its vessels, and all of their details. And this, our first episode of Light to the Nations, again, on this very, very important, solemn day, but a day of action, a day of resolve, a day of wanting to show Hashem how much the temple is important to us and how much we want it to be part of our lives, we're going to be continuing and going very, very far and in great detail into the study of the temple, bringing the light of the Holy Temple back into the world. It's the light to Israel and the light to the nations.